then I said, okay, well, all right, I'll ask her out for lunch. And then some time went by, and she found out that I was a little older than she thought I was. And so, what did we do next? I said, well, okay, we don't have to do lunch. How about if we get together with a group of friends? Come to my house. So, we had about four of us together. Laura was there, and I made my meatloaf wrapped with bacon. Uh huh.
It
Yeah,
was really
it was
good.
good. And she has to do gluten free, so I even did it with the oats instead of the what do you usually put in the
Breadcrumbs, yeah.
breadcrumbs. So anyway, time went by, and we started liking each other more and more. So pick it up from
Yeah.
there.
Well, the part of the story that he forgets because my friend and I had gone on a trip, and it's really a cool connection. How I even knew her through multiple connections that the Lord made. So we'd only been friends a few months, and we were on this trip. I took her on kind of a spiritual retreat, and we were praying among other things about our future husbands, but we were praying for other things. And on the way home, she said it was so heavy on her heart that she needed to tell me about this guy. And it had come to her mind several times, but she kind of dismissed it. And she finally was like, I've got to tell you about this guy. And so she starts telling me about him. And I'm like, wow, this guy sounds amazing. And his name was Perry. And I thought my maiden name was Perry. And I was like, would that be weird to date a guy named Perry? But we talked about it, and I was getting more and more interested. And she told me he was a music minister, and I was really drawn to that. But I was thinking, what guy is going to want to date me with all my, not only lived as transgender, but just a horrible sexual past. And I thought, what godly Christian man is going to want anything to do with me? And but I was really intrigued. And then she showed me his picture, and I thought, wow, he's really cute. It's like, okay, I'd like to meet this guy. So when we were talking about that, and I was like, yeah, I want to meet this guy. She shows me his picture, and I look up, and we were in Perry, Oklahoma, driving through. And so I was like, okay, this has got to be like some kind of sign. So she told him that I liked him, and he's not kidding. When he says it was raining, it was muddy. We were so gross. And I remember I was standing in the house. He and another guy were a little bit late because they had to pick up some furniture, and I'm literally soaking wet. And he walks in the house, and she goes, Perry, I want you to meet my friend Laura Beth. And I'm like, oh gosh, this is not the way I want to meet a guy. It was totally the the what would not seem like the perfect setup. But honestly, as we met over the summer, I thought, he's too old for me, and I just didn't. I wanted to know it was God's will, so I kind of put him off a little bit. But as we got together with friends, I kept thinking, I think I've made a mistake, but I didn't want to tell him that. So over that summer, I just began to like him more and more. We went on a kayaking trip, actually with the singles group. And on that trip, I don't know what happened, but something shifted. And I came home like, I am head over heels for this guy. Like, I don't know. Like, I fell so in love with him. I had never had so much fun with a man before, just enjoying the day. And but what was really cool, God had used the symbol of the butterfly as a kind of a symbol in my life, just something that always God would put in my path to remind me of His blessings, of His will, things like that. And we stepped off the boats for lunch, and these butterflies, I've never seen so many in my life, went whoosh like this. There were thousands of them. So anyway, but we dated. Um, we went on a date after that. Oh, this was so cool. I got to tell you this story real quick. So when we were at the restaurant after the kayaking trip, we were we saw this picture of a race car that was a certain type of races that my dad used to take me to growing up on these dirt tracks that I loved. This was some of my best memories from childhood of doing things with my daddy. And so I was telling him about this. And so our first date, he asked me if I wanted to go to one of these races. So he listened to what I said, and then he wanted to do something I was interested in. And so that was really won a lot of points with me. But he did um, anyway, so I think there's another question that I'm forgetting what the questions are because I think one thing I was about to say I think is in another question.
It'll all come out. There you
Yeah.
go. No, but I
I'm
think
a
it's so.
lot more. I'll just say I'm a lot more like off the cuff and extemporaneous, and he's very like we're so different, and it's been such a,
Mm,
You'll
learning
make a good
to,
team.
yeah, and
amen.
learning to work with each other, and we have strengths and weaknesses.
I love that. I love that. So, Laura, this question is for you. So, prior to meeting Perry, where were you at with God, and kind of what did that look like with your relationship?
Well, I was really for several years. As I was coming, when I first came out of the lifestyle, I thought there's no hope. Like I had no hope of being in a relationship. I thought I was going to be single the rest of my life. And really, I said, God, if you want me to be single the rest of my life, I'll be single. I was reading a missionary story about this lady that was single her whole life. I thought I can do this, but I really thought I was going to be pretty miserable. And the Lord had to. I had really not had a lot of time being single in my life. I'd always jumped from one relationship to another, or if I didn't have relationships, I was just on hookup sites. I mean, I didn't do well single, and God really had to take me through a season of not only undoing a lot of the damage and the trauma, learning to embrace my femininity, but then also letting go of this need to be married and really laying that down and saying, and I really came to the point where it's like, Lord, if you want me to be single, I'll be single the rest of my life. But if you want me to be married, then I pray for a husband. And God really began to give me a vision of doing this ministry, traveling around the country with a husband. And so I really believed at one point that God had a husband for me, but I really couldn't even conceive of a good godly man loving me like that. That has been an incredibly um, like I was looking at him last night and I thought I can't believe that God gave me such a good gift. Like I don't know. I struggle to feel like I'm worthy enough to feel like I'm good enough, and that's such a picture of Christ and the bride. I've discovered that so many of the ways that we as women struggle to trust our husband and trust that he loves us, that he wants to be with us, that he values us, that he those kind of things, we struggle in those same ways with God. It's such a picture of that. And he's teaching me so much about the love of God that I never understood.
And that's just beautiful because it kind of leads into my next question. Now that you are having these feelings and saying, "Oh my gosh, there's a connection," how did you process that in you, and then to allow yourself to engage in that?
It was hard because I had so much trauma from the past, and I really did not trust in the beginning that he loved me, that he wanted to be with me, because my experience in relationships was they liked being with someone because it was convenient. I even had an ex just admit, you were really just a girlfriend of convenience because I did things for him. I gave him money or whatever, and sex and other things. And so when we first started dating, I really didn't trust him in that regard. It's like, okay, I know you say you like me, but you don't. I didn't believe that he actually wanted to be with me and to spend time with me. And at one point, he said, "Have I not shown you that I love you? Have I not shown you that I desire you?" And I realized that I had to make a choice to stop looking at him through the lens of my past and through all those men. And he would say, "I'm not those other men." And I had to learn that he had proven himself to be trustworthy. But I had to stop trusting in my feelings and start trusting in what was true.
That's so good. So as Perry begins to court you, what was easy about embracing that pursuit that he had after you? What was easy about that?
Well, it was easy, one, because he was so good looking. But, and I loved listening to him sing. So there was a lot that, and he's so funny. There was so much that attracted me to him, and those things were easy. But I think the things that were difficult was really letting my guard down and like what if he leaves me? And even I struggled the whole time. In fact, it was funny, on our wedding day, um, I was getting ready in the bridal room, and my friend had him come stand just outside the door and say good morning to. We got married in the morning because we had a flight to Cancun, so um, but he was standing outside the door, and when he said good morning to me, and I just started crying, like, oh my gosh, he's here. This is real. And I'm still, I really was, because in my head, I had believed this lie. When I remember as a teenager, I have no idea where the lie came from. I don't think anybody spoke it over me, but I really believed with all my heart, I really believed I was never going to be good enough to be a wife and that no man would ever want to marry me. And I had all these men that would date me, but never be married. And so that's been an incredibly healing thing to learn to trust him and realize too that God wanted to give me a good gift. I mean, he gives different gifts. He doesn't call
Yeah.
everyone to marriage. But for this broken girl that felt so unwanted and so
Mm.
discarded and so used and abused, to have a good man like this has just been beyond my wildest dreams.
Mm. I just love the honesty, and this is where I was. I was given a gift, and at times I rejected it. At times I saw it as an attack of what is this? But I just love when God says this is what it will be, it will be. And so in that journey, how did you grow spiritually? What are some of the things God healed or went deeper with you, with him and you in this relationship as you're walking into marriage?
Yeah, I think one thing that was interesting is I had a certain idea of what spiritual leadership would look like. And I had a certain idea because I think I really didn't realize it at the time. I was really quite prideful about where I was spiritually. And there was so much that I wasn't aware of. And marriage really is a reflection of, it's like the great sanctifier, as one of y'all said last night, or like, and you kind of reflect each other. So all these things started coming to the surface, and I realized how much I needed to grow. And so I realized he had so much great spiritual leadership, but in ways that I didn't expect. I thought it would look a certain way or that he would say certain things or do certain things, but he has provided incredible spiritual leadership for me and to help me on this journey and to continue to love me through so many difficult times because I've had so much emotional trauma to deal with and so much baggage that's come out, and I've apologized to him I don't know how many times for I'm sorry I dragged you into this because I feel like he's shackled with all this emotional junk, you know, and he just continues to reaffirm that he loves me, that he chose me. And he uses words, I realized at one point he uses words that God uses, that he chose us. That he
Hallelujah.
chooses to be with us, and he says, I love you. And it's not just a feeling, it's a choice for him.
Mm. I love that. It's not just a feeling, it's a choice. Thank you, Laura. So we're going to transition to Perry. And so, Perry, prior to meeting Laura, what was your relationship with you and God, and what did that look like?
Well, I grew up in a Christian family. I asked Christ to come into my life when I was 9 years old. And from the time I was 20 until now, I've been in full time and part time ministry somewhere. Um, I was married when I was in 2000. And of course, you go into a marriage thinking, I'm going to love this person for the rest of my life. But it became a difficult relationship, a difficult marriage. Um, I didn't know. I thought that I had arrived. Once a guy marries somebody, you think, well, I guess my job's over. I've arrived. I don't have to try so hard anymore. But if you do that, then the default is drift. You start drifting apart from each other. You actually have to put some effort into it. And I was naive in that way, but it was difficult. She would, you know, she would go spend all of her money at the casino, not have enough money to pay bills. One time she came home with a new SUV. We didn't talk about it. Where did this come from, right? um, and then the last few years, she didn't go to church with me. I was the worship leader at a church. She didn't go to church with me. So those are examples of how we were not on the same team. She didn't have my back, and I really couldn't trust her. Very difficult, because who wants to live like that in a marriage? That's not what marriage is supposed to be. So the marriage ended in divorce in 2013, which is one of the most horrible things that you can imagine. You know, going through a divorce, I don't know why it takes so long, right? It's months and months, just drags out. And it was really hard on my son, who was about 10 years old. He kept saying, when is this going to be over? Right? So it's going through a divorce. It's like, it's, I think it's like being on an airplane, looking in front of you, knowing that you're about to crash into a couple buildings there. There's nothing you can do about it. That's how I felt about it, hopeless and helpless. So it was very painful. But I can talk about my healing a little bit. There was a lot of hurt there. And then it takes a lot of time to heal from something like that. So over time, I got involved in 3 different singles groups. First, the Lord helped me to feel secure with friends, non-romantic friendships. And that was part of the growth. We need each other. Did you know that as Christians, we need each other for healing? God uses other Christians to bring healing into your life. But as we prayed and as we shared, our hurts, I wasn't the only one that was hurting. Other people had their difficulties. I wasn't alone. So over time, little by little, the Lord started doing his healing. I wanted somebody to, and I had a couple breakups that were very difficult because I was dating a little bit. But I finally got to the point where I decided, Lord, I don't have to be married. And that's at the point where I was healed enough, where the Lord opened up this opportunity for me to meet this wonderful woman. So that took years to get to that point, though. And as soon as I said, Lord, I don't need anybody. I'd like to have somebody, but if not, that's okay. I've got a lot of friends. And that's about the time when I met Laura. And we're still healing. We're still in the process. We haven't arrived. We're still in the process. He who began a good work in us will be faithful to complete it in us.
I think I was just going to add real quick, one of the things that really helped me to trust him is that as difficult as the first marriage was and all the problems he had, and it's a lot worse than the details he's giving, but when he told me that he didn't want the divorce, that she forced him, and I knew that he was willing to put up with all that and he was committed to her despite everything. That really helped me to see that he was a trustworthy man.
Man, I'm so honored to be able to hear this story from both, part whole. And so I just appreciate that. And Perry, thank you for just opening up and going there. And so my next question is, how did you begin to pursue Laura, and what did that look like?
Well, when we were moving, I didn't know that it was going to be a romantic thing. I wasn't looking for romance on moving day, right? I think she may have thought that before.
That's all I was thinking about. I was not focused on moving.
I just saw somebody that was standing in the rain with a cap on. Here's one of my friends. Okay, well, who's that? But I enjoyed talking to her at that restaurant after we moved, and I thought I wouldn't see her again. So we met as a group. I kept wanting her to come to my house, and the more she came to my house with this group of friends, it was non-threatening, So I thought, I like this lady. So we went to, like she said, we went on the river. We went kayaking, and that was a wonderful time. And she was the only one that clicked. I was in 3 singles groups. I made lots of friends, but none of us really clicked, right? And so we had our first date at the race. I had never been to one of those races before. I didn't know anything about it, but I knew that she liked the race, and this would be something that she would enjoy. So I learned a whole bunch about racing that day. And we didn't want to go home because we liked it. You know what it's like to just click. And so we started dating, and I think, after that date, something came up. She said, well, there's another guy that maybe the Lord may want me to go date this other guy. And I was kind of hurt. And so the way she told me, she texted almost at midnight. She said, I think that we can just be friends. Thanks a lot. Yeah? Okay. And I said, oh, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. But then I started thinking about it, and I thought, well, that's not fine. So you know what? I stayed up all night praying that the Lord would change her heart and her mind. Change her heart and mind, because I really felt the Lord was leading me to be in a relationship with her. And so we talked about it on the phone, and we prayed the next day. And I told her, okay, you can go date this other guy, but I'm going to be praying for you. Tell them a little bit more about that conversation.
I probably remember more of the details. Actually, it was funny because, I had made this really dumb prayer. In hindsight, this was not smart. But a couple of years prior, I had prayed, and I said, because honestly, this came out of a place of fear. I had been in so many bad relationships. I wanted the will of God, and I was really afraid to get in the wrong relationship. And so I had prayed, God, whoever you bring to me, before we even date, I want to know this is your will. So I want the guy to come to me before we even go on our first date and tell me that I'm supposed to be his wife. And I thought that sounded like a really spiritual prayer. But so we had been on one day. I'm head over heels. I'm like, this guy's amazing. I wanted to be with him. And then this guy that had asked me out, actually the day before the kayaking trip, this guy asked me out. And then a week later, the whole week after, I was like, no, I'm sorry. I kept giving him all these excuses, the other guy. And he tells me this. He said, Laura, I've been journaling about you for a year. And God told me you were supposed to be my wife. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so I remembered that prayer, and I'm like, and I had no attraction to him. I mean, he was a nice guy, but there was no romantic anything. And I was like, God, are you asking me to? And I was hysterical. We've never told this story in public. But this was really difficult for me because I remembered that prayer, and I thought, maybe this is what God has for me. And he's presented this amazing man that's like beyond my wildest dreams, and then he's going to have me marry this guy that I really don't want to be with. And what I realized, this was funny, but God reminded me of something that had happened a couple of years before that. I was at a restaurant really late at night one time. It was like IHOP, and I was getting food to go. And I was trying to share the gospel with this guy that just left the bar. He was drunk and the Lord, I'm not kidding, the Lord told me to go sit down and eat dinner with this guy. And I'm like, oh, this is just not going to go. I'm like, okay. And so I start trying to share the gospel. And I'm like, Lord, this is ridiculous. He's not going to listen to anything I say. He's not going to remember any of this. And he starts at the end of the meal, he starts weeping. And like tears are just flowing out of his eyes. And he's like, God told me you're supposed to be my wife. And so the Lord reminded me that he had warned me that this is not how he was going to do this. See, I had my plan for how God had to do this. But God brought me this incredibly romantic story instead. And what I loved is after all this drama, because I know guys don't like drama, and so after all of this, and I told him, this isn't God's will and all this, I'm like, he's never going to talk to me again. But you know what he did? The next day, so that was on Friday night that I told him. Saturday is when, he stayed up all night. Saturday, he called and talked to me, and I heard him, he asked if he could pray for me after all this, and I heard man's heart. I was so blown away by the depth of this spiritual connection to the Lord, but also just hearing his heart. He was fighting for me. And even though he was willing to let me go if that's the decision I made, but he was really fighting for me. And the next day I came home, and he was out of my yard in 100-degree heat. This was August. And he was out in my yard doing some landscaping work that I had needed done. And he was really sacrificing himself to pursue me. And that really won my heart. And so the Lord made it very clear that this was the man that God had brought for me.
Wow. Wow.
We knew within about a month of dating, we thought, the Lord has put us together. And I thought, it's too early to say that I love you. We got to have a little time go on here before let's put the brakes on. So my plan was, okay, I'm not going to say I love you, but this month I'm going to say I L you. Next month we're going to say I L O you. So how long did that last?
About a week. Yeah, he left me a note when he went home one night. He left me a note and it said I L underscore 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 you. But it was clear that God had put us together.
I had prayed that God would give me somebody that would be on the same team with me, somebody that would have my back, and that we would be going in the same direction. One of the things that attracted me to Laura was that she loved the Lord. She was doing ministry. She was building God's kingdom, building His church, and I wanted somebody in my life that we could do ministry together. See, I was a worship leader at that time, and she was already doing full-time ministry. And so that's one of the things I prayed for. Lord, give me somebody that will go in the same direction. We're on the same team. Isn't that a wonderful thing to be on the same team? It's horrible when you're on opposing teams, pulling against each other. That's no good.
And I wanted to say one of the things that he has mentioned before that really attracted him to me was one night we went to the fair, and we were started on one of the Ferris wheel, I guess. Started witnessing to this couple there, and that really attracted him to me that I was sharing my faith like that. And I think he really was drawn to my love for the Lord and the way I wanted to do ministry. And I wanted to tell any young people here that may watch this video later, I think sometimes we're trying to make ourselves so attractive, but really our pursuit of the Lord is what really made me attractive. I mean, yes, it's important to take care of our body and to be do our hair and things like that and try to look nice. That's important for a husband. They are visual, but really it's my love for the Lord is ultimately what attracted me.
And she is a wonderful gift from God to me.
I just love when you hear the brokenness and then what from that brokenness is the answers to your desires heart. And I just love that. So Perry, as you're talking, what did your spiritual growth look like in this pursuing and realizing I'm going to have to fight? What was the spiritual growth in hindsight now that you look back that you and God went through?
Well, the Lord knows how to stretch your faith, doesn't He? So there was, when we first started dating, there was some resistance from different people because of her background. And from family members. Can you imagine that? Family members. So I had to be strong in my faith. I really believed this is what the Lord wanted. And I said, Mom. Hope she didn't see this. Mom, I know, I understand how you feel. But she was saying, you don't need to date that lady because she's got too much baggage. I said, Mom, I know you're just going to have to trust me because the Lord is leading me to be in a relationship with this person. And it stretched my faith. You have to get uncomfortable sometimes when the Lord is leading you by faith. You have to get out of your comfort zone for sure. And I learned, the Lord taught me some things from that relationship that was bad. I learned that you need to deal with things when they're smaller. Deal with things deal with things that come up immediately as soon as you can. Don't just assume that they will disappear and get better on their own, because maybe they won't, and then it'll be horrible to try to deal with if it becomes a big, big deal, right? So that's one of the things that we try to do is when disagreements, well, we don't have a lot of disagreements, do we? But when things come up, we deal with them while they're small, and then it's a lot easier that way. So, but the Lord has really blessed me. The Lord has shown me how good He is. I wasn't looking for somebody. I didn't know that I was going to be in a ministry like this. The Lord knew before I was born, before she was born, that we would be together and that we would be in ministry together. What else? The last song that we had when we went out of the church when we were wed. Bum ba-dum bum bum ba-dum bum ba-dum bum bum ba-dum bum bum. I picked that out. She picked out everything else. She said, "You can pick the last song out." Okay, that's what I want to do. And so the reason I did that, because I knew that our marriage would be a great adventure. And the best is yet to come.
Amen. Thank you so much. And so, just in closing, how would you both define marriage, and how does it display God in what God's brought you to together in your marriage?
Well, I think one of the biggest things that I have learned, first of all, marriage. Jesus said, or not Jesus. This was what was it? I can't think of where the references all of a sudden. Oh, Paul. Sorry, and that marriage represents Christ and the bride, and that this is a picture of a much greater spiritual reality. In fact, our wedding, the theme of our wedding was really representing Christ and the bride, and the song that we chose for the whole wedding party to come in before me was a song called "The New Jerusalem," and just talking about how this points to one day we will be united with Christ. And so that was the focus for us. But I think, as I've learned that one, marriage is a lot harder than I thought. Even though we really love each other, but marriage is hard, and just learning to be vulnerable with one another, and there's nowhere to hide sometimes, or when things got hard, we had some real trials in the beginning, and there were times that not because of him, external other things we were dealing with. He's been an amazing husband, but there were times I just didn't want to go home. I just didn't want to deal with things, and I had to learn, okay, we're in this together, and we're going to fight together, and we're going to figure this out. And he would reassure me all the time that he would not leave me, and I had to come to that place. It took me a long time to trust that this was not going to end, that he was not going to leave me till death do us part, and we're going to figure that out. And once I really began to trust that, that helped me relax a little bit and know that, okay, we're okay. But he's also learned. We got some great advice from a marriage book that we read prior to our marriage, where it talked about how if men will, because they want to solve the issue, but women are often far more worried about the relationship. And so we're thinking, like, I'm always concerned. The way I used to view it from my past relationships was, if we have an argument, like our relationship's here, and then we have an argument kind of down here, and we forgive each other, but we stay at this level, and then it's down here, and then down. So that was kind of my view, was that it was never going to get better. It was like you always had a little bit left and a little less. And he learned early on to reassure me of the relationship, even before we try to solve the problem. Go, we're okay. We're going to make it. Like, I'm not mad at you, or even if he's mad or whatever, but like, our relationship is okay. We're going to get through this. We're going to solve this. And that reassurance first helps me tremendously. And that helps me be much more willing to discuss the problem if I know we're okay.
Well, the primary purpose of marriage is not to make us happy. the primary reason is to glorify God. And sometimes you're happier than others, right? But that's the reason that we should be married as Christians, is to point to Christ. You know, Christ and the bride. Jesus is coming back to get the bride one of these days, isn't he? And they'll be together again. So that's our goal, is to build the kingdom, to build the church together. And I'm so glad that I get to do that with my best friend.
The Lord, go ahead. The Lord reminded me that, marriage is such a witness and a testimony of God's faithfulness. That's why Jesus said that Moses gave you a certificate of divorce because of the hardness of your hearts, but it was not supposed to be that way. Divorce was not supposed to be an option for any of us. And I think the Lord has been really highlighting to me the damage that divorce is so much more destructive than we know. And, when the two become one flesh, spiritually and emotionally, the two become one flesh, but also physically in a child. And when there's divorce, it's like ripping a child in half. They don't know who they are. They're lost. They're so broken. And this is not God's way. Marriage is supposed to be a witness of God's faithfulness and how he never lets us go. He never quits on us. And so that even in our struggles, it's such a testimony to the world of his faithfulness.
Well, Perry and Laura, thank you so much for just your testimony individually and then corporately as a husband and wife, because it's just why it matters to speak truth in love, why it matters to stand in intercession and stand in the gap for those that are in this homosexual lifestyle, because this is what God ordained. They went separate ways on the trail, but God said it will end in the way I meant it and made it and promised it to be. And so I just appreciate the dynamics that God kind of correlated with these questions to bring about, how did this happen? It didn't start picture perfect. It didn't even travel and journey picture perfect, but it ended as it should be. So don't give up in the fight. Don't give up in the waiting. Don't give up in standing on the word of God, because he will be glorified even in those moments when you get that call and you're like, what just happened? My world turned upside down. He is still being glorified in that. So I just want to say thank you so much for allowing us to do this and kind of get into your more intimate marriage of questions and stuff. So I am just honored to do that. So thank you, God, for this opportunity. And let's just give it up for Perry and Laura. Thank you so much. You guys can put it right there. Yeah. And so